Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. By Tandem Diabetes Care, makers of the t:slim X2 insulin pump. And by Real Good Foods, real food you feel good about eating.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, JDRF's annual Children's Congress kicks off, and we're talking to three really incredible delegates. Meet Jack, Hannah, and Kabir, who will tell their stories to our nation's legislators.
But another thing that's really close to my heart is making sure that blood sugar checkups are mandatory at all pediatric checkups, regardless of whether there's family history or not. Because the funny part is we actually went to my pediatrician right before I suffered the stroke, and she waved it off, saying that it's, just something to do with puberty, and she shot it down.
Yes. Did you hear that? Kabir had a stroke before they figured out he had type 1 diabetes. He'll tell his story. I'll also talk to our local advocacy chair to find out what Children's Congress is all about and how your child can get involved next time. Our community connection this week is all about getting diabetes gear to stick in the hot, sweaty summer. We've got advice from parents of little kids who swim and adults who take hot yoga. And tell me something good. We'll talk about a remote trip of a lifetime. I took a second look at this one. Wow. Talk about independence. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. So glad to have you along. I'm your host, Stacey Sims. You know my story. My son Benny was diagnosed right before he turned 2 back in 2006. My husband lives with type 2 diabetes. I do not have diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting and local radio and television news, and that's how you get this podcast. Now, usually the second week of the month is a Dear D-Mom episode, but I'll be honest with you, Maura McCarthy and I are hard at work on our Friends for Life closing keynote. Yeah, we're giving a big talk there. Very excited to close this conference out. And with the travel and a lot of the other work it entails, we are going to ask your forgiveness this month. We will be back in August, and maybe we'll have some questions from Friends for Life and more about, what we learned from meeting so many people at what's really the largest family diabetes conference in the world. And that's just a little bit of what's happening right now. Children's Congress is going on as this episode airs. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. And there's also Project 50 in 50. We mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Very excited that Diabetes Connections is a media sponsor of Project 50 and 50. And this is where Michael Shelver and Patrick Murtis, who both live with type 1, and they are traveling to each of the 50 states in the U.S., and they will summit the highest peak in every state. And they are planning to complete the whole thing in 50 days, or less than 50 days. So as of this taping, they had checked off Denali in Alaska, Mauna Kea in Hawaii. I'm sure a couple of days have gone by since when I'm taping, and when you're hearing this, they've probably hit, if they're on track, a few more states and summits. And I am reposting their stuff all over the place on social media, on Instagram, on my Stacey Sims page, and in Diabetes Connections, the group. I really hope you're in the Facebook group with Diabetes Connections. That group is growing really nicely, and we've made some cool announcements lately. So if you're in there, you know what I'm talking about. I will put a link in the show notes for Project 50 and 50, because not only are Patrick and Michael doing this amazing project, they're asking people to meet them. They want to meet people who live with type 1 and their families, and in many of the cases, you can go up the summit with them. So please check out the website, look at the schedule. Maybe it's a place where you can meet these guys. We're making plans to check in with them, get some on-the-road reporting, so hopefully we'll be able to bring you more of their story as the summer goes along. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. One Touch has been a trusted brand in blood glucose management for more than 30 years. This past year, Pharmacy Times and U.S. News & World Report named One Touch as a #1 pharmacist-recommended brand in blood glucose monitoring devices based on a survey of pharmacists nationwide. Find out more about One Touch at diabetes-connections.com. Click on the One Touch logo. Every 2 years, more than 160 children living with type 1 diabetes head to Washington, D.C. They represent all 50 states, and DC. This is JDRF's Children's Congress. And the point here is to help members of Congress, our legislators, understand what life with type 1 is like and why research is critical. So they're speaking to the people who provide the funding, who control the money. Children's Congress is going on right now, July 8th to the 10th. So as this episode airs, we're right in the middle of it. In addition to the kids who go, they have celebrities with type 1, a lot of great speakers. It's a fun event. It's a busy event. But really the heart and soul, of course, is the kids. We have 3 great teenagers from our area. I live in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and they are going this year to tell their stories. And I really want you to hear from them. So these interviews are just really a few minutes each, but you're going to hear from Kabir and Hannah and Jack, and then we'll talk to Jackie, who is our advocacy chair here. So let's start with Kabir. He was diagnosed at 13. He is 16 now, and he has a very different and frankly, a really dangerous sounding diagnosis story. You have a bit of an unusual diagnosis story. You were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 13, but you had a different health issue at the time. Do you mind taking us through what happened?
Yeah. So actually, I had been experiencing migraines and little bouts of vision where, I just kind of lose vision for a little while. And I'd been experiencing those quite frequently leading up to my diagnosis. And I actually suffered a stroke one night. And when I was rushed into the hospital, they checked my blood sugar, and the glucometer actually couldn't even display the number because it was so large. And that's where I was really told that I probably had type 1 diabetes.
Now, this might sound like a dumb question. Do they think that the undiagnosed diabetes is what led to the seizures and the issues you were having with your brain, or was it something unrelated?
Actually, that's a great question. We've visited, I can't even tell you how many different doctors, and none of them actually want to make the call and tell me that the stroke was a result of diabetes. So they've been trying to send me to a child stroke specialist, and I guess that's where maybe hopefully someone can tell me for sure.
But have you had any issues like that since you started on insulin and have managed type 1?
No, actually, since it's been managed, it's been well controlled. But the main thing that we're still trying to figure out is if I'm still at risk.
Got it. Yeah, of course. Of course. That's a big worry. So you're 16 now. You've lived with type 1 for 3 years or so. Why did you want to go to Children's Congress?
I just felt that it's my duty as a type 1 diabetic who has, opportunities in life to kind of be the voice for others like me in less fortunate situations. And I just felt like it's kind of my duty to, have our story heard and make sure that, we're a part of legislation regarding diabetes as well.
Is there anything specific that you'd like to tell these legislators, and any particular law or policy you'd like to, for them to hear about?
Well, first of all, one of our biggest goals there is to push for the renewal of the SDP, which is obviously the program that funds research towards cure and better technology to cope with diabetes. But another thing that's really close to my heart is making sure that blood sugar checkups are mandatory at all pediatric checkups, regardless of whether there's family history or not. Because the funny part is we actually went to my pediatrician right before I suffered the stroke, and she waved it off, saying that it's, just something to do with puberty, and she shot it down, and she actually recommended that I increase intake of juices and Gatorade, which is ironic, right? Because I'm diabetic at the time.
Wow. Do you still see the same pediatrician?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. That's really wild that you increase your sugar intake. Maybe it was, I don't know, maybe something with electrolytes. Who knows? That's really wild.
Yeah. I think that was what she was leaning towards, but obviously it wasn't a very educated.
Yeah. Didn't help. Definitely did not help you there. Anything in particular you're looking forward to about Children's Congress?
Well, obviously, I'm looking forward to meeting congressmen and obviously telling our story and making sure we work towards, making progress with diabetes and all that. But also, I'm really looking forward to meeting all the other delegates and all the JDRF staff behind the scenes who've helped me through all of this, and, just making sure that thanking everyone and just making sure we make the best of our opportunity.
How about that? And how about that pediatrician? Unfortunately, not an uncommon story there in terms of the advice that the doctors can give sometimes when they don't know it's type 1. But oh my gosh, I've never heard of anybody that young having a stroke like that. It's very frightening to hear. I'm so glad he's okay. Well, next is Hannah, diagnosed at age 8. In 2010, she is very active, and she's such a great role model, as you'll hear. She works a lot with younger kids in our area. So here is Hannah.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on the show.
Yeah. So let's just start. If you could tell us your diagnosis. You were 8 years old. This was back in 2010. What do you remember about it?
I just remember just being so scared for what my future would be like. I just remember hearing doctors telling me that I would have to take shots every day and I would have to just never be the same again. And I was just so scared for what my future would be like.
Do you remember when that started turning around? Because I know you and you're not scared anymore.
I think it really started to turn around once I got to meet other kids with type 1 diabetes, and they really started to show me that it was going to be okay and I could still have a normal life.
Did you go to diabetes camp or just at events?
I did. I went to diabetes camp for like 7 or 8 years. It was a really big point in my life.
What do you want to happen at Children's Congress when you think about it?
I just want to show our representatives and show really the whole country why we need a cure and why diabetes is a daily struggle, educate them on why it's so important for us to get funding and how the funding will help us eventually one day lead to a cure. So I hope that they can see that from our stories.
Yeah. I know getting to Children's Congress is a lot of work. And then being in Children's Congress, just the preparation, you have to get your photo album and your history and your talking points and everything. How's the work going?
Right. Yeah, it's been good. It's been a really cool opportunity to show my story, and I've been really able to showcase everything that I've gone through with diabetes. So it's been really cool, and I'm really excited to showcase it all at Children's Congress.
Very cool. Tell me about camp a little bit more, if you could. What do you remember about diabetes camp? I think a lot of people worry that it's going to be like a classroom learning situation, or you just sit around in a circle and talk about diabetes all day.
Camp and just going to diabetes camp really helped me come out of my shell with type 1 diabetes. It really taught me tips and tricks, and it also made me almost just proud to show off all my devices and less embarrassed about it. And it was just really cool to meet other people that were dealing with the same struggles and people that I could lean on for support.
Do you do that during the year? Do you keep in touch with your camp friends when you're at like school and during the school year?
Oh, yeah. Every day, really, we talk to each other. And just anytime we're dealing with something with diabetes or not related to diabetes, we just really can lean on each other. And it's a really good support system for us to have.
I've seen you at a lot of events, and you always seem to work with the younger kids, too. Is that fun for you to kind of help them feel okay?
Yeah, it's been a really cool way for me to kind of pass on all the support that I got as a young child with type 1 diabetes. And it's really great for me to be able to help out the girls who are my age and even a little bit younger who I know what they're going through. And I'm able to really help them more than anybody else could because I understand what they're going through.
Well, this is kind of a personal question. You don't have to answer. But, it's got to be difficult. My son has type 1, so I don't go through this, but, he has pockets is what I'm getting at. It's got to be difficult. You're a fashionable young woman. Wearing these devices has got to be tough. Did it take you some time to figure that out and kind of come to accept it?
Yeah, definitely. It was a little bit of an adjustment. Definitely a little bit harder to kind of have to start standing up for myself, too, because it's so obvious when you have these devices that there's something a little bit different about you. So just learning to advocate for myself in public with strangers and when I take them to school, it was definitely an adjustment, but it's just made my life so much easier. So I wouldn't want it any other way.
Tell me about running track and running cross country. I mean, that's got to be difficult on diabetes management. You were a junior in high school, and I know you're doing well, so I guess you figured it out. But tell us, if you could, just how you did figure that out. Did your coach help? Did your parents help?
Yeah, definitely my parents and my coaches, as well as my teammates, have really been awesome in helping with this, and just a lot of just trial and seeing what works. And then in addition, just having my teammates reminding me to carry gummies with me or just checking in on me to see how I'm doing. And then, of course, the coaches just being accepting that I may need to take a break or eat a snack every once in a while has been really helpful for figuring out track and cross country and everything else with diabetes. Running cross country or anything else like that is challenging without diabetes. So when you add diabetes into the equation, just know that it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. You're just going to have to do a little bit of planning in advance and finding what meals work for you. And then, of course, just being super open about it and letting everyone know the risks and how they can help you when you may run into an emergency.
Well, I'm thrilled that you came on to talk to us. Congratulations on being selected, and let us know how it goes.
I definitely will. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll hear from our third delegate, Jack, in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And it's hard to think of something that changed our diabetes management as much as the Dexcom Share and Follow apps. The amazing thing to me is how it's helped us talk less about diabetes. That is the wonderful thing about Share and Follow. As a caregiver, a parent, a spouse, whatever, you can help the person with diabetes manage in the way that works for your individual situation. Internet connectivity is required to access Dexcom Follow. Separate Follow app required. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Now, here is Jack. He was diagnosed at age 3, and he loves to play baseball and surf. What do you do for baseball? Do you mind taking us through the process? Do you wear your pump or, during the games? How do you wear it?
So usually with baseball, you'll have to show up about an hour and a half before the game so you can warm up, take some swings. So through that, I have my pump on me the whole time. I have it connected. And when we are about to start the game, I will take it off and check my blood sugar level to make sure it's okay. And then during the game, I won't check it or really do anything unless I feel really low or really high. And then after the game, I will put my pump back on and check my levels again to make sure they're all right.
How do you surf? What do you have to do? Because we've taken my son surfing a couple times, and the one thing I really remember is it's not so much about the gear, it's about making sure you have low snacks, because he just goes low as soon as he gets in the water. Is that what happens to you?
Yeah, so I've always made jokes with my mom saying that whenever we go to the beach, my levels are never high because I am always in the water from like 6 hours to 8 hours a day in the water. So I don't eat very much, so my blood sugars do tend to go low. So we carry like airheads and stuff like that just to get my levels back up. But overall, it's the same thing as baseball, just taking it off and taking little breaks and coming out of the water and checking my levels to make sure they're all right.
Why did you want to apply to Children's Congress? Had you heard about it before? What made you want to be part of that?
So the real reason I wanted to apply to Children's Congress was because I've always said, I want the stem cell technology so I can never have this again. And none of that happens without talking to someone first, talking to someone that has the funding for it and that knows what they're doing. So I'm trying to get funding for diabetes and touch on a subject that's not talked on very often.
So you really have a purpose. I mean, you didn't want to do this just because you thought it would be fun or interesting. You're going to talk to the men and women in Congress to say, we not only need funding for diabetes, we need it for stem cell research.
Obviously, there's that fun aspect to going to Children's Congress, but I think the main purpose of it as I'm getting older is to get research for it. I would understand if you're younger, it's more of a fun type of experience, but as Kabir, Hannah, and I get older, I think it's more important to focus on finding alternate ways of treating diabetes and new technology and funding and all of that.
Yeah. Before I let you go, Jack, what is your advice for kids who are maybe your age or maybe a little younger, whether they go to Children's Congress or not? Is there anything you want to say to other kids with type 1?
What I would say to younger kids is always apply to Children's Congress because applying never hurts. If you get in, it would obviously help you, but it's not hurting you if you don't get in.
And finally, to talk about applying and more about Children's Congress is Jackie Stewart. She is our local advocacy team chair. And her son, Michael, was diagnosed at age 12. He's now 22, so they are celebrating a 10-year diaversary this year. Here is my talk with Jackie.
Well, it's always fun to see kids sharing their personal stories. And, they live with it every day. They can tell it like nobody else can. So members of Congress really love listening to kids. They listen to kids more than they listen to any of us adults talking about type 1. So, and just to watch their passion grow for advocacy.
For people who aren't familiar with Children's Congress, what is the point here, really? It's not just cute kids and photo opportunities, right?
No, there's real work that's going to be done up there in D.C. It happens every other year, and they go up to Washington. They get to select one parent or one family member to go with them. And they go up to D.C. and attend some trainings, first of all, just to, learn about a little bit more about advocacy and how to be an effective advocate. They actually go to Capitol Hill and meet with some of the members of Congress, and some of them might actually get to meet with their own member. They go in groups, so they're not going by themselves. So they do a lot of prep work for these meetings, and they go in depth into what the issues are and some of the language and speaking points that they can use in those meetings. Another day is spent on the Hill going, to several meetings. And the kids also attend a hearing where some of the kids are selected to share their stories. So it's a very impactful 3 days. It's a very busy 3 days. So they're going to be, and when they meet with a member of Congress, they're going to be asking them to do things like vote yes for renewing the special diabetes program, which is set to expire. And I can go into more depth in all of these. They're going to be asking Congress to fully fund the NIH and FDA. They're going to be asking members of Congress to protect those with pre-existing conditions and make sure they have all the health care benefits that others do. So they really do get into the heart and soul of the JDRF advocacy priorities.
Let me ask you, so what's your diabetes story?
So in 2009, my son Michael was diagnosed. He's age 12, and it was similar to many other people's stories. He didn't look sick. He didn't act sick. It was actually, we were fortunate. He was losing weight, but we missed a lot of the telltale signs.
Yeah.
He was losing weight. He was thirsty, but we really didn't see all of that. He was saying that he wasn't feeling well, and did a blood sugar check actually as part of another panel for another condition he was dealing with at the time, and it just happened to be caught. So they caught it early, and so he had not progressed to having ketones, and he did not have to be hospitalized. So we were one of the fortunate ones. But when we look back and we look at the pictures and we you go back and you say, oh, yeah, now that all makes sense. And it all falls into place once you get that diagnosis.
Wow.
And all of a sudden you get that insulin and, he started to feel better. So he's 22 now and he's doing well. He is a college student and studying to be a biomedical engineer. Doesn't know, possibly with diabetes in that mix, who knows what he's going to do with that. But, yeah, he's had some ups and downs for sure in this 10 years. So in August, it'll be his 10-year diaversary.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's great. I mean, it's not, but it's great.
We just keep raising that money and speaking our story and advocating that things will get better and easier for him.
So if parents are listening and thinking, okay, I've got, another year and a half before I'm going to be applying for the next Children's Congress, perhaps, what should they be thinking about? What are some things that active advocacy families can do with their local JDRF chapter now?
That is a great question. I'm so glad that you asked that. So we love to help kiddos build their so-called resume for Children's Congress. And what they really need to do is just jump in, get involved, attend walks, attend the gala, volunteer at events. Of course, the advocacy staff who do some of the selections, they're going to be looking for some advocacy involvement, and that's very easy to do. But it really doesn't limit you to just doing advocacy. It means reaching out to your local office, your local chapter office, and saying, hey, as a parent, I want to volunteer, my child wants to volunteer, or if they're old enough, the child can volunteer themselves. Teenagers are oftentimes in our local office doing some volunteer hours. So volunteering at the local level, getting involved. We love for kids to come out and help us recruit new advocates at our events. So if that's a summit, if that's a walk, if that's a gala, if that's a bike ride, being an advocate yourself really helps. Going on the JDRF advocacy website and saying, I want to be an advocate. And that's really very simple. It's mostly just, as you know, responding to action alerts via email, via text. It doesn't always mean that you're going to go and speak in front of a group of people. Now, as being an advocate, we love for folks to come out and attend the Promise to Remember Me meetings every other year on the off years of Children's Congress. So that's going to be happening next summer in 2020. And if they register to be an advocate, they will automatically get an invitation and be notified when there is a meeting scheduled in their district with their member of Congress.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Big thanks to all of them, to Jackie, to Kabir, Hannah, and to Jack. Lots more information about Children's Congress in our show notes, and I'll link back to our previous episodes. I mean, we've talked to some delegates before. We've also talked to some of the celebrities who go, but my favorite interview from Children's Congress was with Lauren Stanford, who is the previous kid chair, I guess they call them, when she was much younger. And that is an interview about how something like Children's Congress can really change your life. So I will link all of that up. Jackie also told me about some forms if you want to get more involved with JDRF, some simple things you can fill out, or if you'd like to become an advocate as you listen, doesn't have to be a kid, of course. And we will link all of that up as well. Our community connection this week is all about getting diabetes gear to stick. You're going to hear from parents of kids with type 1, adults who live with it, and a certified diabetes educator who was diagnosed after she became a CDE. Community Connection is brought to you by Tandem. Now, we've used an insulin pump for 12 years this month and a CGM for 5 of those years. From time to time, things are just going to happen. You need customer support. Tandem Diabetes Care does an amazing job anytime we need help. It isn't often, but you want to know the person at the other end of the call is there for you. A patient survey conducted by DQ&A, an independent diabetes research firm, reported participants rated Tandem Diabetes Care number 1 in customer service every year since 2013. Support specialists are available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We are thrilled with the support we've received for the t:slim X2 insulin pump. To learn more about Benny's pump, visit diabetes-connections.com and click on the Tandem logo. Much of what you're about to hear was actually in an episode that I ran, almost 3 years ago now, which is kind of hard to believe. Time flies. But I kept this in. I wanted to replay this episode because the advice is great. Now, one note, you will hear a lot of people talking about leaving sensors on for different lengths. As you know, the FDA has only approved the Dexcom G6 for 10 days of wear and previous versions for 7 days. And there's some other outdated information here and there. You hear me talk, I think at one point, about using an Animas inserter. We don't use the Animas product anymore, as they are out of business. There are a lot of product names that go by in this episode. I will link up all of the products in the show notes. And if you're not familiar with that, show notes, every podcast app has a little button that says details or more here. If you can't find it, head back to diabetes-connections.com and you can always find it, or jump into the Facebook group and say, hey, Stacey, I can't find it. And I will make sure that you get what you need. Many of these interviews were done at a pool party, a get-together of T1D families where I ran around like a dork with a microphone. And there are 2 more formal interviews. So we start with one of the moms by the pool.
Hi, my name is Susan. My daughter is 11 and her name is Danielle. We use Skin Tack for her Dexcom, which works pretty good. She's also on the Omnipod. Normally it stays on pretty well since it gets changed so often. So we put the Skin Tack on her arm or, abdomen, wherever she's wearing it, let it dry for a minute or so it gets a little tackier, and then insert the Dexcom. Does it work well over the summer? It works pretty good. We're pool people. We're at the pool 4 or 5 days a week, so it works pretty good, believe it or not. I think sometimes it just, it's just like perfume smells different on different people and stuff. I think sometimes, because some people struggle with it so much and some don't, I think some of it's skin type too.
We'll hear about more methods, tips, and tricks in the episode yet to come. But I want you to hear my interview with certified diabetes educator Lisa Foster McNulty. Lisa became a diabetes educator in 1995. She was working in home health care at the time, and then she became a certified diabetes educator a few years later. Interestingly enough, she was later, after she was already a CDE, she herself was diagnosed with diabetes. She now works at Integrated Diabetes Services and spent some time with me talking about how to get all that gear to stay on. Lisa, I'm glad you could talk to me today. Thanks for making some time.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right, so this is an issue that I'm thinking about it. I have had more conversations with my diabetes mom friends and adult type 1 friends than with my diabetes educator. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say, because in the summertime, the sweat and the swimming, we have, like many people, we have issues keeping the devices on my son's body. So let's start out, if we could, by just talking about some best practices, regardless of time of year, and just using whatever it is that you're using. What do you tell patients to be careful about or to do when they're doing insertions?
Well, I think it's always important to make sure that we're preventing infections. So you want to start with skin that is perfectly clean and dry, because that way, the infections are reduced, and also it helps to improve adhesion of the products to the skin if we don't have dirt, oil, and moisture issues going on. So that's, kind of the first thing to start with.
What do you like for clean skin? I mean, you're talking simple soap and water. Should we be using anything special?
Well, using something like an antibacterial soap, like maybe Dial, to clean the skin off, just letting that be perfectly dry afterwards, maybe cleaning it off with an alcohol swab is, for many people, perfectly sufficient. Sometimes people have problems with infections, and then we need to get into other products that might help to reduce that. But for most people, it's not a major issue. But using something like an IV prep wipe before putting on an infusion set is really helpful, because it is an antiseptic wipe, and also it leaves behind a little bit of a tacky surface to the skin. So it'll help the infusion set to adhere better. Okay, so I mean, and I know there's different brands, I think, but when you're talking about an IV prep, these little wipes or liquids, they're cleaning, and are they providing a barrier? What do they do? They give you a little bit of a tacky surface for the infusion set to adhere to, and there is an antiseptic property to them as well. So I guess that's really kind of a dual function. And they're used for people who don't have diabetes too, right? I mean, they must be used for lots of things in the hospital. Sure, exactly. If you're starting an IV, that might be used on someone. Well, sure, because it's called IV prep. I've always wondered about that, though, because, I get mine in the mail, and I'm like, well, who else is using this? It's just interesting to think about. And then proper insertion, follow the directions from whatever manufacturer you happen to be using. Anything in terms of, using an IV prep on top of it or anything like that, or is it just kind of follow the directions and go from there? I think following the directions, making sure that the infusion set is inserted at the proper angle, and that you're just using good technique, and that's not the reason that the infusion set isn't sticking in the first place. Can you give me an example of technique that's not so hot? I mean, I know there's different kinds of inserters and manual insertion, but any common mistakes? I know sometimes when I'm helping my son, and I don't know if this is a mistake, I know he doesn't like it, I'll press against, we use an animus inset, so all you have to do is press the outside of the inserter, but I'll push it up against his body, and he's always like, Mom, you're killing me, like, stop pushing forward, just click the sides. I think just having, contact, but not actually pushing it in, because you don't want to go in so deep that it's going to hit muscle. So, just the contact with the skin. I think when you put an infusion set on, it can be really helpful, too, to kind of hold your hand there on the adhesive for a minute or so that the heat from your hand kind of helps with the adhesion of the infusion set to the skin. So that's something that can be helpful as well. That's a great idea. So I've heard from a lot. Go ahead. You just want to make sure that you're putting an infusion set in at the right angle, because if it's not the right angle, it could come out. Like if you're using the back of the hip, it might be hard to reach around well enough to insert it properly. So maybe another person needs to assist or something like that.
I'm going to jump in and take a quick break from the interview with Lisa. I want to bring you more from the pool party, that end of summer pool party. Here's some advice from other parents.
Hi, I'm Jenny. My son is Preston, and he's 7 years old. He was diagnosed a year and a half ago. He uses Dexcom CGM. We have the G4 Share, and he also uses the Animas Vibe pump that has integrated with the G4 Share, but we really don't utilize that part of it. We keep the gear on with the belt clip for the pump, but we always tape his site in with the OpSite FlexiFix tape. We always use alcohol before we put it on. I feel like that gets the oils off, and usually we try to do it after a shower. And we've never had a problem with it coming out, but if we don't use it, it does get pulled out. We cut 4 strips, and we put them on all 4 sides of the pump site, and the same exact thing for the Dexcom. The Dexcom, we usually, don't tell anybody this, 21 to 28 days. And of course the site we change every 2 to 3 days as needed. If it itches him, we change it immediately. That usually means there's an infection or some irritation going on.
Hi, my name is Soumya, and my daughter Meda is a type 1, and she is 6 years old.
So you just showed me, what was I looking at? What was that tape that's over the desk?
Kinesiology tape. Girly patterns for her, zebra patterns, pink and purple, and I buy that in rolls, and I cut it to size and stick it over the Tegaderm. The process is wipe it with an alcohol wipe, and then Flonase the area, and the Flonase dries. I put skin tack in an oval with a little spot left for the wire to go in. Then on top of the skin tack goes the sensor, once it's a little tacky to the touch. And on top of the sensor goes the Tegaderm with a hole cut in the middle. And on top of the Tegaderm is my reinforcement kinesiology tape. Friend of mine told me about skin tack, and she did not like the Tegaderm on itself. She wanted something colorful. And she also started complaining that the Tegaderm, sometimes it pulls on her skin. So she's too young to be, using other products. So she breaks out into big rashes without the Flonase. Flonase keeps it under control, but I still have to change it once in 7 days. She goes a day beyond 7 days, she'll start itching. So.
Hi, I'm Donna. My son is 9 years old, and he's a type 1 diabetic. He wears a Dexcom, a CGM. It stays on pretty good, but we do have the skin tack wipes. So after we try and make it go 2 weeks because it gets better the longer it's on. So we use the skin tack wipes, and they stay on pretty good, but the skin tack wipes after a while make that little Band-Aid very hard. And that's the only thing. So we just tried the grips, but he won't put them on. I'm trying everything to make him more comfortable. I'm like, oh, it's cool, Mom. And then, no, never mind. Not one more thing on me.
Now here's more from my interview with Lisa. Okay, so let's talk about the Dexcom and other CGM, but I want to start specifically with Dexcom because I've talked to the folks from the Dexcom company, and they have mentioned that they're working on their adhesive product because there are skin irritations that they're aware of, so they're trying to develop one for more sensitive skin, and they're also aware of the issue that some people do have keeping it on for the full 7 days that they recommend. And frankly, and you don't have to comment here, people leave it on for a lot longer than is recommended because they want to stretch it out as long as they can. Many people say it gets more accurate as it goes, but the FDA has only approved it for 7 days. However, at the Friends for Life conference recently, the Dexcom booth was giving away tape, which I thought was really interesting. They were giving away cute cutouts of, I think the brand was Rock Tape, but don't quote me on that, for to put on top. So acknowledging that there is this issue. What do you tell people who use a Dexcom to try? Is it the tape over the top, or is it the same system, kind of try the skin tack underneath or the sticky stuff underneath first?
Well, you have to be really careful with the CGM because you don't want to insert the sensor through any type of a covering that's been applied to the skin, whether it's something that's wiped on or a dressing that's been applied, because it can damage the sensor. It could make it fail. It could compromise how accurate the readings are. So you really need to leave a little area for the sensor to insert through that's just, your plain bare skin. But the Rock Tape is a product that many people use to keep the Dexcom in place, and there's something called Rockadex that actually comes with the little area for the sensor already cut out, and it's, fun colors and shapes, and it doesn't look medical. It's just kind of a fun thing. So it's expensive, but it's something that's kind of a popular way of holding those in place and effective too.
Yeah, I wonder if that's what they were giving away. There's another company called Griff Grips. And, we're going to be linking up lots and lots of stuff here with the episode at diabetes-connections.com. And they're similar in the sense that they have fun shapes and cutouts. And I think that they're a relatively newer product. But do the tapes we've tried, I can't say at this point, maybe I'll be able to edit this onto the end. I can't say at this point if Griff Grips have worked because my son is away at camp. And you'd think maybe he'd write me a letter. But no letters yet, and that's where he's trying Griff Grips for the first time. So when he comes home, I'll see if they worked better for him than the other things we've tried. But I'm curious, do you know if those tapes are different, what they have in them or on them, that makes them different from, say, a Band-Aid or medical tape?
I'm not sure exactly what they're made of to be able to speak to that, but I know that I've heard people say that they've, certainly had measures of success with that. So if it's working and it's keeping them in place and it's not causing any problems with the function of the CGM, that's a good thing. So. And
you mentioned being careful when you apply a skin product under the Dexcom to kind of make a donut, keep a hole in the middle for the sensor wire to go in. What about tape over the top? Can you cover the whole thing, or should you just cover the edges?
You're really supposed to leave the CGM open and just kind of picture frame around it, so that there's not moisture underneath and that sort of problem happening. So my vote is to have something that goes around it, but that leaves it open on the top, so that there's a cutout window.
I even have, and I think many people listening may be familiar with this, there is a product on Amazon that's some kind of stamper or maybe for sewing or scrapbooking, and it perfectly fits the Dexcom CGM. So if you order it, then you can kind of make your own of these shapes with any tape you use and kind of cut out with the stamper for the Dexcom. It's pretty wild stuff. And so we've done that as we tested over the years. Things like and I'm going to get some of these brand names wrong, things like, athletic tape and K tape or vet wrap. Well, no, not vet wrap because that would be a wrap. I don't know. There's so many different things out there. Again, I think it comes down to what works for you as an individual. But are you familiar at all with like the KT tape or things like that you can buy at the drugstore?
I haven't heard of that particular tape, but HypaFix tape is something that's actually quite similar to the adhesive that's on CGM in the first place, and you could use that to picture frame around the edges. So that's another possibility if you are not going to use something like a rock tape. I've heard kinesio tape is another option.
I think that's the K tape. I think that's just a cute name for it. And we've used, you mentioned the HypaFix tape. We've used the Opsite tape, Opsite Flexifix tape. Is there a difference? It's funny, I was at the dermatologist and I saw the HypaFix tape. She had some, and I was wondering if there was a big difference or if it's a brand name. Do you know?
Well, there's a lot of different transparent film dressings out there. So there's one called Polyskin. There's one that's IV3000. There's Tegaderm. They're made by different companies, but they're all sort of the same general type of product. And you may have an allergic reaction to one and not another, or maybe one is more breathable than another. So those tend to be kind of the differences between them.
I never thought I'd be a tape expert, but I have all of these roles. We have had better luck with the Opsite, but that's just been our experience than Tegaderm or other things like that. Okay, so that brings us, I mentioned, that brings us to maybe wraps, because a lot of people will use a soft tape or some kind of athletic tape to just wrap up the Dex. If you're wearing it on your arm, you can't really do that if it's on your stomach or on your lower back, but you can kind of wrap it up. We have found that it gets kind of soggy in the pool, but I suppose that would work pretty well if you were just a little sweaty. Jumping in again so you can hear from some other parents.
Hi there. My daughter is Addie. She's 13 years old. We live in Arizona. It gets really hot here. We spend a lot of time in the summer in the water. She wears a sleek sleeves over her Dexcom on her arm. It helps a lot.
I was so glad to hear from Wendy because she's the person I saw on Facebook who introduced me to Sleek Sleeves. I had never heard of that product, and it's really cool. There are a few products like this, and again, I'll make a list and link it up on diabetes-connections.com. It's a cover. It goes over your Dexcom if you wear it on your arm or your insert. It's actually made for PICC lines, like you could get in the hospital. And Robin Roberts on Good Morning America wore a sleek sleeve PICC line cover on Good Morning America, which really helped them take off. There are some other manufacturers who make this as a brand called Bands for Life. There are bands that are sold by some insulin pump cover makers. And I've heard of some parents who actually make their own, or they take an athletic sleeve. There are some sleeves that are sold separately. Baseball, I think, is a sport that has the bands. You'd think I'd know. My son has played baseball for years, but I never saw these before. And some parents take a rash guard, a long sleeve swim top, and cut that. It's just got to be firm enough to hold it in place, but it can't be too tight as to cause compression lows. And interestingly, I've talked to a couple triathletes who say they don't have any problems keeping their Dexcom or their arm placement stuff on when they're competing because of the bathing suit. I guess they call it a tri-suit that they wear because it goes over the top. Now back to my interview with Lisa.
Sure, absolutely. So some kind of a spandex sleeve over that, like a sleek sleeve, would hold that in place.
Yeah, and I guess I got ahead of myself. So, right, the sleeves are also interesting, and Sleek Sleeves is a really cool product. This is something that is, I don't know what the material would be. It's very soft. It doesn't feel like you have a blood pressure cuff on or anything like that. It's very soft, and it goes, you just kind of slide your arm into it like a sleeve, and it covers up the Dexcom or your site or anything you've got on your arm. And a friend of mine uses that all the time with her daughter at a water park, and she says it's fantastic. I think my son wears his Dexcom too high. And once again, yes, the FDA has only approved Dexcom for use in the stomach and lower back for children, but he wears it on his upper arm, so we couldn't exactly get the sleeve in the right place. It was kind of scrunched up on his shoulder, so we're waiting for that for maybe another try when he gets home from camp. Is there any concern about pressure on a CGM?
Sometimes when there's too much pressure, it can cause what we call compression lows with the CGM, so you don't want to squish it too much, but certainly enough to hold it securely without being excessive, I think should be okay.
And you'll probably know if it's too tight because you will see that compression low come on fast. It'll drop pretty significantly. At least that happens in our experience sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've been very heavy Dexcom here because that's what we use. But is there anything different about the Medtronic CGM or other devices that we may have something different to talk about? I don't have any personal experience with that.
I think, the same basic concepts apply. And, just in terms of sites where you're wearing it, it's probably going to be a lot of times worn on the abdomen. And so in that type of a situation, I think more picture framing the edges would be a better approach to trying to hold that in place a little bit more effectively, but I think the same basic concepts apply.
Here's some advice from Molly. She's an adult with type 1, and she talks about how to keep this stuff on during hot yoga.
I try to do everything right after a shower when I have no oils on my skin. I do at least 2 alcohol wipes in that spot. I'm super thinking about where I'm moving things ahead of time. I do 2 alcohol wipes, I do a skin tack wipe, and then I carefully place the device on that, whether it's my Dexcom or my infusion set. And then after that is done, I carefully go around the edges and remove any, sticky stuff that's left that's going to stick to my clothing, basically, with a little bit. You could use oil. I use lotion to kind of get the sticky, nasty off. Am I good for 7 days? Most of the time, yes. Am I good for more than 7 days? Sometimes, yes. With an infusion site, I'm good, absolutely, for at least the 3 days that I need it. No problem. But I've even done Bikram yoga. I used to be a Bikram yoga fanatic. I'm currently pregnant. I can't do that right now, or I choose not to do that. People do still do that. But you sweat. It's 110 degrees for 90 minutes. So you sweat. And I was able to keep everything on. Whatever works for you. But that's my personal savior is the Skin Tack wipe.
Now here's more from Lisa. And I hope you don't mind me asking, you're a diabetes educator, and you have an interesting story in that you became a person with diabetes after you became a diabetes educator. Is that right?
Yes, true. I diagnosed myself.
Wow. That must have been very interesting. Can I ask about that? What was that like?
I was really shocked. I just didn't expect it, but I was happy that I caught it as early as I did, and so that was the good part about it. But certainly nobody expects that it's going to happen, and particularly it's just ironic that I was already a CDE. So,
Lisa, before I let you go, did I miss anything? I mean, that was such a great rundown of the big and the basic points of all this.
No, just thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. This was fun, and it was a good refresher to and timely, I think, just with the summer, and this is the time of year where if people are going to be having more problems with adhesion of their products, it's more likely in the summer. It's hot, we're sweating more, we're more active, more likely to be in the pool, so very timely topic. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for joining me. One more bit of regular person advice. I have to admit, I had not heard of this method before.
Hi, this is Dee from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And for my normal everyday wear for my Dexcom sensor, I put Skin Tack on the actual adhesive before I put it on the back of my arm. And then when that's all set, I also take Skin Tack and then run it all around it and put that opposite Fit Flex over top of that. I recently went to the beach. I also went last year, and what I used for that to get a whole week of wear out of it is, my usual sensor and the opposite Fit Flex, around it. And then I put more Skin Tack all around that. I cut a rectangle of paper towel and put that over top of the sensor and tape that with a little X of opposite Fit Flex tape. And then I take a big Tegaderm and stick that down over the whole kit and caboodle. It actually lasted a whole week through sun, sand, sunscreen, ocean, pool, and hot tub.
That last one is unique, right? All of the products mentioned are linked up in the show notes. And it's a quick follow-up as I was mentioning there. I wonder if this worked for Benny, or I wonder if that... Nothing worked. Nothing has worked for him except for Stay Put patches. Stay Put Medical is a product that this is not a commercial. They didn't pay me to say anything, but it's for whatever reason with his skin and the product, it's amazing for him. The only downside is he keeps it on so long that he has some funky tan lines. But I highly recommend Stay Put. And like many of these groups, when you click on the website, they may send you some free samples. Another thing that is a good idea, in my opinion, because everybody's skin is so different, you may consider doing a local get-together if you have a group or other moms, or just, maybe call your JDRF and say we want to have a picnic or something, and then tell everybody, bring your stuff. Bring your grips, bring your sleek sleeves, bring whatever you've got. Bring your Opsite FlexiFix. And then you can trade and you can kind of see from samples from your friends and from other people that what works. To me, that's the best way to do it, because you've got to do trial and error, and it can get very expensive. And by the way, in a pinch, a waterproof Band-Aid from the drugstore can work really, really well. You're not supposed to put anything over the transmitter, right? Well, we've done that, and off the record, it works just fine. I wouldn't do that long term, but for example, we went in the Dead Sea when we took our amazing trip to Israel in December, and I did not want that salt water. That's the saltiest water on earth. I didn't want it messing with the transmitter. So we took a giant waterproof, I think it was a Tegaderm Band-Aid, but it doesn't really matter as long as it's waterproof. And we slapped it all over the whole thing, much further around the Dexcom than we generally would do, but put the plastic Tegaderm or whatever that is over the top. And it actually worked really well. We didn't lose any signal. And so if you really need it, some of this stuff is not available in your grocery store or your drugstore. That's something that'll work in a pinch. All right, time for Tell Me Something Good. And this is a story. I pride myself on Benny's independence. This one made me take a step back. Wow. All right, Tell Me Something Good is brought to you by Real Good Foods. This has become our go-to when we need something convenient. And I like it because it's not junk. Right? There are going to be those times where you want to grab something quick, you want to pull something out of the freezer, and you just don't want that crazy blood sugar spike and that yucky feeling when you're eating a lot of junk food. Real Good Foods delivers. We love the chicken crust pizza. I think the Supreme chicken crust pizza is probably Benny's favorite. The cauliflower crust pizza is really crispy. This is a really nice, genuine pizza feel, kind of low carb pizza. And the breakfast sandwiches, I was so glad they came out with this because breakfast can be really hard. These are 18 grams of protein and 6 grams of carbs. There's so many more products. They've got the poppers and the enchiladas. You can find them in a lot of local grocery stores or check them out online. Get the link. Just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Real Good Foods logo. Tell Me Something Good is where we talk about anniversaries or milestones, things to celebrate. It can be amazing stuff for the community. It can be an individual just doing something difficult. And this week, this is an individual story that knocked my socks off. So Maureen posted, "Am I crazy or thriving?" Her 16-year-old son, Jacob, had been selected to go on a 4-night camping trip in the Yukon. She writes, "It's only accessible by small planes, really remote, supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. People pay big bucks to do it. We are letting him go. He's taking a month's supply of insulin, pens, syringes, pump supplies. He will have no way to contact us. If there's an emergency, they will have to fly a plane in depending on weather. I'm excited for him, but a little worried. We live in Inuvik, Canada's Arctic." I don't know if I said that right. Jacob is 16 and has had T1D for 10 years. So I contacted Maureen and she gave me permission to share this story, and hopefully we'll have them on the show soon, but here is the upshot. Jacob had the best trip ever. He loved it. Kept his blood sugar in a healthy range, did lots of hiking, swam in freezing water, saw a lot of animals, thankfully no bears. We are so proud of how well he did. And the pictures are as spectacular as you would imagine. I'll check with Maureen and make sure I can post them in the Facebook group. But pretty amazing stuff. I mean, I guess they live in a pretty remote area to begin with, but that doesn't mean that, a mom is going to be super comfortable sending her kid, to the Yukon, to this national park. I'm thrilled that she did it. I'm thrilled that she let us know. Congratulations, Maureen. Congratulations, Jacob. Great stuff. As this episode is airing, Benny is beginning his month-long excursion at regular diabetes camp. It's not the Yukon, but I worry just as much. When we drop him off, we always go over everything with the staff. There's so much detail that goes into this, but it's a great camp. They're so used to him now. I think he's the only T1D camper this year, but there's usually 1 or 2 people on staff with type 1. So that's been an interesting learning experience. He's been going to this camp since he was 8. I've talked about it plenty of times. You can always go back and look at the camp episodes when I share more about Benny. But yeah, I'll be on high alert this week because the first week I'm always really nervous. But he does really well, and hopefully that will continue. Next week, I will be at the Friends for Life conference, but we will have an episode. Very interesting story. Diagnosed at Disney World. I talked to a family that I'd communicated with them last year. Their daughter was diagnosed while they were on, their dream vacation to Disney. And so it was fun to catch up to them and find out how it went and what the people at Disney did to go above and beyond for this family. So that episode will air next week. We are taping the game show episode of Diabetes Connections at Friends for Life. That'll be later in August. So lots going on. Please join the Facebook group to stay posted, or make sure you're signed up for the newsletter if you're not on Facebook. And you can go to diabetes-connections.com, and the sign-up should really just pop up there for you. If it doesn't, you can always reach me, Stacey, at diabetes-connections.com. Thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much as you listen. This was a long show this week. I hope you got a lot out of it. I really appreciate you listening and sharing the show. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.